Graham and Mitch McConnell have not been doing their jobs very well. You know,
would anybody who's really, and I think this holds true for anybody who has any kind of, sway over the public. So this would include like law enforcement. Anybody who's really in it, honestly, for the purpose of serving their country, serving their people, protecting their people, that's, I think, an admirable thing. I can see how these kinds of jobs can lead to an abuse of power, but I mean, as far as people who genuinely want to do something good, they want to do something nice, to me, I think that's kind of an admirable thing, because it can't be easy. It can't be easy to run and or protect a country full of people.
No, it certainly can't be easy, and certainly can't be easy to do it well.
Right.
Now, speaking of powers that are completely beyond our control and may not have our best interests in mind, we're going to take a quick break. And when we return, we're going to talk with Mary SanGiovanni about the genre, which she is the undoubted queen of, cosmic horror. And I'm so glad I got a little giggle out of you for that, Mary. That makes me so happy. It really genuinely does. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. This is The Literate Nerds. Welcome back to The Literate Nerds. I am joined in this episode by the queen of cosmic horror, Mary SanGiovanni. And we're going to do our little segment we call The Literate Revisit. And today, we're not going to talk about a specific piece of media. We're going to talk about the entire genre of cosmic horror. Now, I am, of course, very, very familiar with cosmic horror, and any number of my listeners are familiar with it as a genre, but can you give folks kind of a brief definition of cosmic horror and what it is?
Sure. And now keep in mind, folks, this is a definition that I've more or less refined from doing Cosmic Shenanigans and doing research into what other people think is cosmic horror, what Lovecraft thought of his own work and things like that. But basically, a cosmic horror story is one in which the antagonist, and I use antagonist because a monster or evil entity is not always necessarily an accurate depiction of what the thing is. It is often malevolent.
Yeah, it can be a force of nature, like
nature, right? It can be,
for instance, the film The Endless,
exactly,
which is most definitely cosmic horror. But it's cosmic horror, more of a
an indifferent,
time dilation kind of thing that they're stuck in, as opposed to an evil entity that's trying to break through the veil into our dimension, kind of thing.
Exactly, and that's the major aspect of cosmic horror is that the antagonist is of such proportion in its threat that it could be seen as dwarfing the significance of any human endeavor or of humanity itself. There are a lot of things that are tropes of the genre that are not necessarily absolutely vital to a story being cosmic horror, but that's essentially, I think the most basic definition is that it is horror in which the antagonist and or the threat of the antagonist is of such cosmic proportions, such large proportions, that it actually dwarfs humanity. So this often leads to a sense of nihilism, like why bother doing anything? Because ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, we're dust. We're particles in the eye of greater beings, but what I've come to find, particularly with modern cosmic horror, is that that insignificance is often redefined, even though intellectually a reader or the character may say, yeah, sure, okay, so there are these gods and monsters which are, the size of skyscrapers and have infinite power, and that there's no real way to defeat them, only hold them at bay. But still, whatever my goal is, it is significant to me, and it makes me significant to someone I love. And you see things and say something like Silent Hill, where something like the town itself, Silent Hill, and the creatures contained within, and the gods and monsters that come from Silent Hill, could easily overwhelm any one person, and could easily overwhelm the human race, and spread and bleed throughout the rest of the world. But what we end up seeing is that the character's goal is usually to reconcile one aspect of the self or one aspect of a relationship with another person, that in doing so would set them free. They come to terms with someone's death. They find a missing child. They come to accept the fact that they have done something that they need to understand is a part of their character. And it's most cosmic horror, because of this nihilistic point of view, it doesn't always have a happy ending, but I think many times it has a satisfying ending. It has an ending where, if by happy you mean everybody's okay and unscarred and everything is resolved at the end, cosmic horror doesn't really work that way. But the characters can reach a place where they can accept who they are and accept the fate. They can accept their future, and that's kind of the closest you get to a happy ending, I think, in cosmic horror. So, and like I said, there's lots of tropes. I mean, cosmic horror, especially if you look at very traditionally Lovecraftian cosmic horror, then it almost always has some type of cult in it, that is dedicated to this greater antagonistic entity. You have tomes of ancient lore, because that's the other quality too that I found, is that cosmic horror often has a sense of pursuit of something.
Yeah, pursuit of like a mysterious. There's quite often MacGuffins are used, in cosmic horror.
Yeah. There's pursuit of knowledge. There's, but it's something almost obsessive, that these characters are driven to the point of no return in trying to find this thing, whether it's knowledge or an object or whatever it is, even at their own expense.
Yeah, like there's a lot of there's not a lot of like overt drug use in Lovecraft. Like there's occasional use of cocaine or opium, which makes sense for the time, of course. Right. But the behavior of Lovecraft's characters is all addict behavior. They all behave like drug addicts.
Yes.
Alcoholics.
Yes. Some people have criticized Lovecraft, saying that his characters are, I don't want to say like two-dimensional. That's not the right way that they're very, very much a character of one particular personality trait, almost, almost like they're a fraction of a person because they're so consumed by this one personality trait.
People have complained about Lovecraft, that his characters are paper thin, but most of his characters are pretty much reflections of him. And if you kind of know what kind of a guy he was, you can, I don't know. I've always found that anytime while I might not know about their history, so on and so forth, like the protagonist of The Shadow over Innsmouth is a very distinct character to me. I know that guy. Yeah. Same thing with Randolph Carter. Yeah. I know that guy.
I think with Lovecraft, it was in some stories, I think he used characters merely as a vehicle for that personality trait. But in other ones, I mean, there's a depth of character there that, like in Shadow over Innsmouth, that people don't always give him credit for. And to me, cosmic horror is a people story. They're all people stories. They're stories about the other important aspect that I've come to find about cosmic horror, maybe more than the cults and the ancient books and any of the other tropes. One of the most consistent elements of cosmic horror is fluidity. There is fluidity of time, fluidity of space, and fluidity of person, both psychologically and physically. They are very easily subject to change. And that, to me, is where some of the real horror lies. And for Lovecraft, I think that was where the horror was.
Oh, yeah, there's so many.
You cannot count on anything to be stable and solid.
Yeah, there's so many characters that you see in his stories who take, drastic changes where they're suddenly like, no, now I've seen it all. It makes sense. Yeah. Where they have that snap, that moment where they gleefully accept their station as, a cog in the machinations of these horrific entities,
That's one of the things I really kind of love about cosmic horror is that the idea of insanity itself is not so much, an important element of cosmic horror as the fact that what insanity represents, which is basically that instability in the mind and instability in the body. There's a lot of body horror, even in Lovecraft's work.
Well, that's another thing I wanted to discuss about cosmic horror is the multiple different genres that come under it. But, cosmic body horror and Lovecraft, absolutely. I mean, Shadow over Innsmouth right off the bat. Color Out of Space. I mean,
oh yeah.
You can't. Even The Lurking Fear, somewhat, where where his ancestors have devolved. There's a lot of body horror.
Rats in the Walls.
Yeah, Rats in the Walls. Yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah, that's right, because his ancestors aren't the original residents of Exham Priory. They were breeding subhumans, but they're kind of not human anymore either, right? As I remember.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a lot of that. Now, part of that you could say is due to, his xenophobia.
There's no doubt. Listen, this show is about, obviously about progressive attitudes. We're very pro LGBTQ. We're pro, Black, Indigenous, person of color. But, we are, I'm well aware of Lovecraft's racism. And
right.
I think his racism is absolutely terrible. And I think in a lot of ways his racism does inform his writing. But I also think what he created and what he contributed is so much greater than his own personal bigotries. And Victor, I had a conversation with about this with Victor Laval. Who was kind enough when Big Black Stand in Attica premiered in February 2020. He hosted the first interview that Jared and Black's Widow Pearl had at the Strand, and our first, we sold out. It was great. But Victor and I were talking before, and I'm like, it's so nice to meet you, man. And we started, talking about Lovecraft and stuff, and a Ballad of Black Tom had just come out, and he was like, "Yeah, man, no matter what you say, it's like, he's like, you can't discount Lovecraft's contribution. You just can't do it."
And I've made the argument before. And I want to put this tactfully, but I think that the quirks that Lovecraft had personally, plus the xenophobia, which I think was a major driving force of his racism, and the fact that he was just terrified of change, I think that those things actually produced